we do know also that dietary experience alters the liking for salt. And this is a kind of a difficult graph to explain, but basically what it shows is that children who are fed starchy table foods for the first months in life exhibit a high preference for salt. And if you would just look on the right side, at the age of 2 months, as we showed before, there's no particular preference for salt, but those infants that had been exposed to salty, starchy table foods show a very large preference. That's the red going up, whereas those that hadn't been exposed show, again, still show no preference. And I want to point out something here that we'll see in just a moment, which is the concentrations of salt. And down at the bottom on the far right of the graph, 0.34 molar salt is very, very salty. Again, it's about twice the level of typical soup, and yet these young children tend to have a strong preference for this. Here's another example of that. This is studies in 3 to 5 year old children. And on the left is their response to salt water, which of course we don't consume on almost any circumstance. And on the right is the same concentrations of salt in a clear soup. And these children by now respond just the way we would do. That is, that they reject the consumption, the percent preference for salty water, but they love salt when it's in a soup background. And again, notice that the concentration of 0.34 molar, which is very, very salty, is their preferred level, much, much higher than is commercially available. But we can look at adults and demonstrate that their response to salt is modified by experience. And this is obviously an anecdote, but it's a wonderful one, where Jonathan Swift in Gulliver's Travels describes going to a country that has a very low salt diet. And when he gets to that country, he finds that he can't stand the food. It's bland. He doesn't like it. He almost can't get it down. But after a while, he gets used to it, and after a while, everything is fine. And then finally, he goes back to the country that he came from, and everything is way too salty. And so this is obviously just an anecdote, but there are a lot of other anecdotes suggesting that one can modify how much people like salt based on their experience with salt. And this is the first study we did many, many years ago that demonstrated this experimentally, proving what Gulliver knew 200 years earlier. So if you just look on the right side, the experimental side, we have two curves. One curve is testing people's response to how much they like salt in crackers, and the amount of salt is in grams on the bottom of those curves. And if one looks at the before they began a low salt diet, one sees that their optimal level of salt was quite high. It was actually the highest we gave them. But after 2 to 3 months, that moved down, and by 2 to 3 months, their preferred level of salt was much lower, and the high concentrations were not liked at all. And this is really the experimental demonstration of what Gulliver was talking about. And this has now been shown by a number of people. It's widely believed to be true. We got no one paper is going to prove anything, but if there's a consensus, which there is for this, it seems to be a profound effect. And based on that, in part, CDC and FDA have recommended, and the Institute of Medicine formalized these recommendations to that what the U.S. diet should do is to the U.S. The food industry should do is reduce sodium gradually in manufactured foods. And if this was done over time, and the time is not specified how much it would be, people would, the whole population could be brought down to be liking and consuming a lower level of salt. The attempts to do this, of course, other people will talk about. It's very difficult, but this is the theory that we should be able to reduce the amount of salt by gradually reducing it, and people wouldn't mind it because they would adapt to the lower levels. However, it's also the case, and this is kind of ignored, that you can go the other way. And so it's possible, and there's a couple of studies that show this, to increase salt intake and therefore increase preference and move away from liking less salt. Now, I mentioned age-related differences in liking for salt, but I want to emphasize them again because this is a remarkable difference between children and adults. Here's a study, again, that we did many years ago, where we looked at adults and preschool children and measured their optimal level of salt in soup. The curve on the left, the red one, is adults, and lo and behold, the level at which we found the people liking salt was about what the commercial salt level was at the time. And on the right, you see again preschool children showing a remarkably strong preference for high salt. 40 years later, one of my colleagues did exactly the same study again, and this is on the right. You can see where I've circled it in black, and the results are identical. That the adults prefer about the same level of salt as found in commercial foods, whereas the children show a very strong preference for salt. So it's going to be important to think about how you feed younger children, because they seem, for reasons that we don't understand, to have a high preference for salt. It's been suggested maybe it has something to do with growing, that the sodium need is different. We don't know why it is, but it looks like it's very consistent across studies and even across cultures. If we look at the other end of the age range, older adults may perceive salt as less intense than younger adults, and as a consequence may also tend to prefer higher salt levels. And this is one recent study that suggested that. This is a time intensity evaluation of salt. So they're looking at salt again over 10 seconds. If you just look at the right side, it's easiest to see that the ability to detect salt and the intensity of salt in older people never grows as strong as the ability of younger people. And it may be that they lose salt, their ability to taste it, and so consequently they may need more to reach the optimal levels for foods. And so I think one has to look particularly at the older people as maybe having a different salt world than the average middle-aged people.